Okay.
Welcome everybody to our panel on abolishing the drug war. My name is Thea. I am the policy director at Civil Rights Corps, which is a nonprofit organization that does impact litigation and policy work to end systemic injustice in the legal system. And I am so thrilled to be joined today by three amazing panelists who can talk a bit about their work to abolish the drug war in Oregon. So our three panelists are Theshia Naidoo from the Drug Policy Alliance, Hubert Matthews from Central City Concern, and in just a moment we will be joined by Senator Jama, who has really been working on this issue both from inside of the state legislature as well as from advocacy on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go ahead and start off with some introductions. So I was wondering, starting with you, Hubert, could you just tell us a bit about who you are and how you got involved with Measure 110?
Well, my name is Hubert Matthews, and I've been working for Central City Concern for the past decade, 10 years plus. And I was approached when Measure 110 was being campaigned for to speak for the campaign. And I have lived experience with these issues that Measure 110 was addressing. And so I felt like this was a great opportunity for me to be able to help make some change and to be a part of the continuing challenge that we have to change the old status quo of addressing, the war on drugs and trying to get people the help they need instead of locking them up, because I experienced that a lot. And you're not going to lock your way out of drug addiction. It's just not going to work. So I decided to step in and help, and I'm still very much active in that process. And I'm also, I also in my work, I'm an outreach worker in the community that is very much on the front lines with the problems that's going on in my community, the addiction, the homelessness, the mental health, just all the things that's going on. And this is a great first step to be able to correct some of these old systems. Mm-hmm.
Great. And what about you, Theshia?
Yeah, so hello, everyone. I'm Theshia Naidoo, and I'm the Managing Director of Legal Affairs at the Drug Policy Alliance. We're a national nonprofit organization promoting alternatives to punitive drug policies. And regarding Measure 110 specifically, I was involved in Drug Policy Alliance, has been involved since its inception through the campaign and then ultimately through implementation. So I'm really excited for this conversation, look forward to the questions.
Wonderful. Well, Theshia, I'm actually going to come back to you for the first question. And just so everybody knows, there will be a question and answer period at the end of this panel. So if you do have any Q&A, please do just go ahead, drop it in the chat, and we'll be happy to get that addressed at the end. But just to kick us off, Theshia, can you set the stage for why the move toward a public health-based approach to drugs? Hi, Senator Jama. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry about the technical issues.
Hi, Senator.
I'm so
sorry. Yeah, I'm here.
That's right.
Great. Well, Senator, I will come to you next. I was just starting to ask a question to Theshia, but then we'll definitely get you in. So thank you so much for joining. But Theshia, I would just love to hear a little bit about historically, what has our approach been to drugs and why has this approach been unsuccessful? Like, why was a change needed?
Great. Thank you, Thea. So, 50 years ago, President Nixon declared a war on drugs, but the reality it's actually been a war on people. And what we've essentially done is criminalize what is fundamentally a health issue. And Hubert mentioned earlier, we're never going to be arresting our way out of addiction or drug use. And so the decision to use the criminal legal system or the criminal justice system as a response to a health issue has been disastrous for communities and for individuals. So we've decided that we would like to punish drug possession and drug use. And right now, the statistics bears out, it's the single most arrested offense in the United States. And in 2019 alone, there were about 1.3 million arrests for drug possession. That translates to one arrest every 23 seconds. So just think about the time we've been talking right now, how many people have been arrested for drug possession. The racial disparities, this has resulted in huge racial disparities in terms of arrests and incarceration rates, and has led to over-policing in communities of color. And since more people are arrested for drug possession than any other offense in the United States, we've seen that disproportionately it's Black, Indigenous, Latinx, low-income folks that are caught up in the system, and it makes it the #1 way in which these communities come into contact with the law or with the legal system. It's the entry point into the criminal justice system, and once a person is caught in it, they're caught in the net of the system, and it's really hard to get out of the system. And last summer, as we were reckoning with racism and policing, people started, there has been more an awareness with the general public that we need to evaluate the role of policing in society and question the role of policing when it comes to fundamentally a health issue. Should police be involved in behavioral health issues? And so Measure 110 really was a touch point to all of those issues. But just in terms of a context, using the criminal legal system, it has been a blunt tool that has not been very effective, but it has also been disastrous for individuals and communities. At the same time, and I know I'm gonna wrap it up so you can go on, Thea, but the consequences of having an arrest are not just loss of liberty for that time. The consequences follow you sometimes for the rest of your life. A person with a conviction can have barriers to housing, employment, educational opportunities. The person can be deported and ripped away from their families. And so, those are some of the immediate consequences. At the same time, we see incredibly high rates of overdose. And if the goal of the drug war was to address drug use and bring down usage rates, it's been completely ineffective, and we're seeing incredibly high rates of overdose. And then at the same time, there's really a lack of investment in treatment and harm reduction interventions, and an over-investment in policing and the criminal legal infrastructure. So I'll pause there, and then you can get to Senator Jama.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that. And so Senator Jama, would love to come to you, and I'm going to actually merge two questions together here. Would love for you to start just by briefly introducing yourself so that folks know who you are. And then what I would love for you to do is take a moment to actually set the stage for what actually happened in Oregon. So what was Measure 110, or I should say, what is Measure 110? And then really building on what Theshia was just saying, I'd be particularly interested in how you view Measure 110 as really working to address some of the racial disparities in Oregon. I understand that was some of the advocacy that you were doing with Unite Oregon, before you were actually elected to office. And so would love to just hear a little bit of that story from your perspective. Oh,
Senator, you're on mute.
Senator, I think you're muted.
Everything is going well, sir. How are you? Oh, wonderful. Good.
Thank you, Thea. I really appreciate this conversation. I've come to this conversation for a couple of reasons. One is that I came to as a refugee this country about 22 years ago, and my work around criminal justice reform started when I did have my own personal experience being profiled, and then just working with the community around their experience around how they deal with the police, and in terms of their experience in profiling and being a lot of times just basically who they are, being based on color, Black, brown folks as well. So generally, that's kind of where I came to the work, how I came to work. And generally, I've been pushing end profiling and racial profiling campaign for many, many years as a executive director of what used to be a Center for Intercultural Organizing that became later United Oregon. So I really immersed myself around these criminal justice reform issues for many years. I think I know we don't have a lot of time, but in just brief overview, in 2015, we pushed a bill that tried to define what profiling is, racial profiling is. That's how we came along. And that bill also created a task force that will be chaired by our Attorney General to kind of understand a little bit about profiling, but also overall criminal justice reform that needs to be pushed in Oregon. That committee that chaired by our Attorney General came up with several recommendations. And one of the recommendations was data collection in terms of the profiling and overall just how the people interact with the law enforcement overall. Through that process, and I knew for me, it became, when we engage in law enforcement, it became either it's a perception or it's a reality about profiling. And we were saying it's actually reality, and law enforcement folks were pushing, no, it's actual perception. And through that process, we say, let's collect the data. Why don't we figure out the data collection? And that led the bill that was passed by this Oregon legislature called HB 2355. And that bill really, first of all, the classified drug possession conviction is from misdemeanor to felony to misdemeanor. And that's what it did. But also it collected data around that issue overall. When the data came back, it confirmed what we already knew, that Black and brown folks are disproportionately impacted by charges in terms of the drug possessions, but overall profiling as well. That led us then what now is known to be Measure 110. And I would have to admit, without the Drug Policy Alliance, this work would never had happened in Oregon. I think the approach that they took and creating local coalitions that are really committed to issues and really working the issue with the people who know how in local communities, and then creating statewide ballot measure 110. That was really the significant impact that we have never experienced. And one of the things that they have done differently this time as a ballot initiative work in Oregon, that they say saying that we want to, based on people who have been experiencing most impact by drug war, so meaning people of color, Black and brown folks. And that's what has been different as in Oregon overall, because in the past we've been seen as they coming to the table later when, can you do your outreach in the community? That's what we need. But we were at the table at the beginning to creating what this Mission 110 needs to be to impact in Oregon. And I have to admit, I want to cut short. I know we have a long time. I can talk about long time this issue, but Measure 110 has been one of the most broadest achievement and work that I have done in Oregon, and it would not have happened without the Drug Policy Alliance investment as well as collaboration. So I will stop there.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. Hubert, I would love to come to you now. So my understanding is that Measure 110 has a few different components. There is the decriminalization component, the decriminalization of drugs. There is this new measure where folks will get, fines instead, which there are various opportunities to get waived. And then there is an infusion of new money for treatment. So what I'd love to hear from you is, I know you have been doing work in the community and really focusing a lot on how you can connect people to services and how we can break this cycle of using punishment as a way to deal with drugs. So I'm wondering if you can just speak to how you view Measure 110 as really helping out the people that you have been serving.
It looks like Hubert.
Okay, here. Can you hear me? So
We can hear you.
I'm having technical difficulties with my camera, and I was on mute. My supervisor was trying to help me solve the problem, but I'll speak to that. So I feel like Measure 110 is a great start, right? It's a great start because what it's done, from my experience, when I was in my addiction, before I got clean and changed my life, the war on drugs was about arrested you and put you away if you didn't stop using, right? So, and then there was a law from my experience back in the day called the drug-free zone law, where they made my community a trespassing offense if I got arrested or were seen in that area again. And so, I'm in my addiction, so I don't have anywhere to go, so I'm not leaving my community. So what that was is that once I got arrested one time, I could be arrested on site as the police seen me in my community and be given a criminal trespass. And if I had paraphernalia on me, they would arrest me and give me that case too. Even if I didn't have drugs, if I had a crack pipe on me with residue, I would get charged with a possession too, which is just like having a rock, right? But I would just, and then so what would happen in a month's time, I'd probably get arrested maybe 15 times on those same charges, right? And sometime before I even fought that case, I'd get another one and another one and another one. So what happened was when I decided to change my life, I had all these cases that prevented me from being able to get a job, that prevented me from able to get housing, and prevented me from being able to become a productive member of society. So it took me a while, and it took a lot of perseverance to be able to fight, even though I'm trying to do something different, to fight to get that stuff removed. But I can say I have gotten that stuff removed. I just got a passport mailed to me yesterday. So all that stuff have been removed, and that's why I'm here today. But what that did was, like, instead of trying to help me get clean by arresting me and punishing me, it caused more harm. So when I had an opportunity to say, here's a measure that can prevent causing more harm than good, I jumped on it. And so now what's happening with this, now it's been passed, and and we're getting money to put out into the community to try to help the people that are being harmed by drugs and all the things that comes with that is a good start. But the problem is that there's no infrastructure in place for the money that's coming in. So we still have a lot of work yet to create treatment beds, to create mental health services, and this is just a start. So it's a good start, though. Measure 110 is needed, but so there's still a lot more that needs to be done. I really feel like, there should be reform in the criminal justice system. This is something I've been thinking about. If people are still getting arrested, not even just for small amounts of drugs, but people have not stopped using, right? They have not stopped using. So in order to pay for their habit, they have to steal and do all these things where there's still small crimes that they commit. I think if the criminal justice system could be changed into a place where a person goes to jail, that he gets treated when he gets there. Because I remember when I went to jail, a lot of times I was just in jail sitting there waiting to get out. But I think, because we have this problem with not having enough beds and not having enough services. I think if money is redirected within the criminal justice system while people are there and they begin to get services while they're there, a counselor, drug treatment, mental health, services to help them go out into society and probably try to turn that corner with the existing services that are in place. I think that would take a great burden off of the system to go forward. So, I think this is a great start. And I think if I could sit down and talk to people that are in charge of the purse strings or in charge of making policy, not just me, but people that I work with and people that's in the community, can have more of an impact and more of a say to what's needed on the ground level, the grassroots level, because that's where the work is. You know what I'm saying? When people come to me and say, hey, I want to go to treatment, but there's a wait list that's, they want to go right now. They may change their mind. If I can get them right now, how, for example, like, if you get injured, there's an emergency room you can go to right now and get help. So that needs to happen within the SUDs and with drug addiction. If I need help, I need to be able to get there right now, because people are a resource, And another thing, if you want to stop the appetite for drugs, you need to stop the people got to stop. We got to cut people from wanting it. If people could know, if there's no market, if there's no buyers, there's no market. So we need to try to prevent people from using and give people hope to have them to not want to use drugs, because America has a large appetite for substances, and we need to find out why that is. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Got it. No, thank you, Hubert. And absolutely, it's clear that a lot of investments are needed to really get in front of this issue, and definitely want to come back to some of the challenges moving forward to make sure that those resources really are getting into the kind of treatment that folks need. But Theshia, I would love to just switch gears a little bit just to think about some of the mechanics for how this victory actually happened. So first, I just wonder if you could break down for the folks on this panel, what were the two phases of this? So I understand there was the ballot initiative and then there was implementation. And so just explain a little bit kind of what that is, but then also if you have any advice for people who might be considering doing something similar, like would you recommend taking this kind of ballot initiative approach? If so, why? Do you have any kind of lessons learned from the advocacy side?
Sure, thank you. So just in terms of like pulling back the lens before we even decided to move forward in Oregon, we did a lot of landscaping and research and found that, through public opinion polling, focus groups, meeting with stakeholders on the ground, meeting with coalition partners, and folks like, Senator Jama's former group, Unite Oregon, just to find out about the scope of the problem. And what we saw in Oregon was that there were high overdose rates, there were high rates of arrests, but at the same time, the state ranked nearly last in access to publicly funded treatment. And people have seen decades and decades of the same policy of people cycling in and out of the system, but no measurable results or successes. And people were ready for trying something different. And so those are some of the conditions or the preconditions, if you will, before going in and thinking like, let's try and proceed with a potential ballot measure in Oregon. But once that was the case, the ballot was an approach rather than potentially a legislative approach, because public opinion polling, as I mentioned earlier, public opinion is far ahead of where legislators are. And I'm sure Senator Jama can probably talk about this, being a senator in the state. The public is definitely far ahead of where I think legislators are sometimes willing to go. There might be some political considerations if you are a legislator that might impede your ability to vote for decriminalization. Now, I think the tide is changing, and we've seen bills introduced in a number of states after Oregon passed this decriminalization measure. So I think it's signaling that legislators are taking it seriously and can actually see this as an opportunity to move the needle. Mm-hmm. But getting back to your original question, the ballot was the right avenue in Oregon, and not every state has a ballot measure process. There's just a handful of states that have that as an opportunity, where it's a citizen-led initiative to reform a particular policy. Oregonians have had a history of doing like forward-thinking, progressive type reforms, in multiple arenas. In the drug policy context, there's a long history, starting with marijuana decriminalization in the 70s. Oregon was the first state to do that. So historically, there's been a lot of support in the state for kind of far-reaching progressive policies. So that was, another factor that was useful in Oregon. But I think the issue that resonated most across the state was the fact that when you have drug use, which is fundamentally a health issue, people have seen that there are long waiting lists to access treatment. And if you do get into treatment, there's, very short, there were lack of resources or lack of investment in that infrastructure. So there wasn't meaningful access. But also in speaking to groups on the ground, what people felt, what was very clear is that people didn't think there should just be access to drug treatment, but really a whole host of services and social supports, and housing was like one of the critical pieces that was identified as being needed in order to support somebody in recovery. And so our lessons learned was, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. We will leave it to the legislature to identify exactly what the services are that are needed. But what we did in terms of the structure is say the services that should be funded are, treatment, peer support, recovery support, housing, both permanent and transitional housing. And so there's just this really full range of support that can be provided as a result of Measure 110. And really it's designed to provide whole person care and not just what people think of as drug treatment. So I'll pause there, Thea. I know that I kind of went a little bit on a digression, but happy to focus in more if you have something else you'd like me to focus on.
No, that was great, thank you. So I'm mindful that we are unfortunately running near to the end of our time, and we do have a couple of questions in our Q&A. So what I'd love to do is take one of the questions in our Q&A, and I'm going to offer that to you, Senator Jama, to talk about. And then I will go ahead and wrap things up with just a few takeaways that I got out of this conversation. And I do also want to note there was another question about research on addiction rates when policies around drug use are reformed. And I would just flag that if you go to the Drug Policy Alliance website, I think you will find a ton of amazing resources. So apologies, we will not be able to get to that question right now. But Senator, one thing that I would really love to hear from you is about some of the big critiques or concerns that were raised during this process and how you work to address them. And I understand that there were concerns coming from both more conservative people and in particular people in the law enforcement community who were concerned about losing really kind of some of their leverage, right, that they could use to make arrests. But then there was also this concern that has come up in the Q&A about the fact that decriminalization is certainly a big improvement over the status quo, but full legalization and is something that seems like it would be even better. And so I imagine this must be a concern that was also raised during the process. So, do you have plans to continue moving down the spectrum and to pursue full legalization? Or, how did you work to address these sorts of concerns during the campaign?
Thank you, Theshia. I think this is a really important question, and I'm going to go a different approach. I think the reality is that, first of all, I think folks have to understand Oregon's politics and overall how we structure. We're a very small state. We don't have a lot of resources available to us. We also are, I think probably Theshia mentioned it, but we invest in terms of the investment, one of the lowest investment in terms of drug treatment and mental health overall. So we had a long way to go before Measure 110 come to our state. But also politics of Oregon also generally, we are progressive. We tend to pass a lot of progressive policies, but in terms of translating racial justice and overall low-income Oregonians, it's a really, really difficult challenge to overcome in terms of that policy that has much broad impact in our community, particularly those who are most impacted, the issues that we're talking about. So with that background, I think going back to your question, I think some of the, of course, law enforcement talking points basically was really around, we need to make sure that we have to have this leverage to ensure that people are doing the right things. But also overall, lack of resource. We don't have resources to do this kind of investment that you're talking about. And then, really, it's not a big issues that we need to deal with it. I think those are some of the overall talking about issues that we hear about it. But in terms of going back to the essence of this work, I think for me, one of the things that we have to do, understand that this is not a sprint, but it's a marathon. And to ensure that we have a long-term strategy to that, whether it's a decriminalization or legalization, it's important issues to consider. But we have to have a combination of both short-term and long-term strategy. And this is where Mission 110 came along. We were lucky that we were able to allocate $302 million in this session because of all the federal dollars that come to our state, and just overall we are in good position financially as a state. But overall, nothing like this ever happened in Oregon politics before. I am so grateful that we're able to allocate $302 million in biannual session this year. So it's a really great success, meaning that we are allocating $150 million investment each year for the next 2 years. And we're hoping to continue that path forward. Overall, we are also planning to establish about 36 county services hub centers that really providing what Theshia was talking about around ensuring that we approach this issue as a holistic approach, and the mindset of keeping in mind social determinant of health when it comes to the housing, jobs, access of treatment. As a chair of housing, we also did investment around housing issues as well. So it's really combination of those elements that I mentioned has to be realized in order to have effective policy. That's really where I will land it. But again, the issues will be, this is not a marathon. This is not a sprint, this is a marathon issue. So we have to keep in mind that we are a long haul here, and we have to continue to push this issue forward as a state, as a community overall. And I hope, folks, last thing I'm going to say is that if you take one thing from this conversation is that as someone who has been a community organizer and then became a senator, coalition building and centering people who are most impacted by the issue to be the leaders of the people who are leading the campaign, that is the most important, valuable lesson that you can take from this conversation. So thank you so much. I know we are out of time, but I can go along to continue this conversation, but I'll stop there.
So I'm not sure if we may have lost our moderator.
It looked like it. Did we lose her? I lost my picture a long time ago.
Yeah.
Did she leave?
So well, I guess we should thank the attendees for listening, and hopefully if you have questions in the expo booth, there's some resources that we provided from Drug Policy Alliance, so hopefully you can take a look at that. But I guess thank you for your time and your attention.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Thea.
Yes, thank you, Senator Jama. Nice to see you. Thanks, Hubert.
Nice to see you.